Welcome to another week, another show of Hawkeyed with me, Dave O'Hara. Thanks for tuning in. Got another great show lined up for you this week, and I know you'll think so after watching it. Got James Vandenberg joining us here in just a moment, the Hawkeye quarterback, former Hawkeye great, and always brings content to us that we want to hear. So James is going to give us a season recap, and can't wait for that. And then after that, we'll have former Hawkeye all-time great Jeff Horner, still one of the statistical leaders in any meaningful offensive category for the Iowa Hawkeye men's basketball program. Now he's the current head man into year 3 at Truman State University as their head coach, and always looking forward to talking to Jeff. But before that, we'll have our Mershman Minute here with Joe Mershman in just a moment, and then of course David Eichholt, the Hawkeye Insider. That being said, I've located Joe Mershman. First and foremost, Joe, thanks for joining us as always, and how's everything going for you in this new year?
Dave, things are going well, and I want to congratulate you. I saw the ratings for Fox 28, Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and you are the #1 ranked late night show. So that says something about the quality of the guests and your talent there.
Well, thank you for saying that, and thanks to the viewers, of course, as always, for making us #1 in late night, and thank you for saying that, and I can't wait to talk to you more as the season progresses, Joe. We've got so much coming up we want to put and want to capitalize and kind of talk about Iowa Hawkeye football and put a capper on it with you, as well as Hawkeye basketball. So a lot of big things upcoming, and thank you for the kind words, and thanks for always making this show possible. Look forward to catching up with you next week, Joe.
Thanks, Dave.
And as you can see, I've located David Eichholt, Hawkeye Insider. Why? Because he is the Hawkeye Insider. HawkeyeInsider.com. You see all of David's information there at the bottom of the screen, at David Eichholt via social media. This is Hawkeye with me, Dave O'Hara. First and foremost, as always, David, thanks for joining us. You're on the road today. I greatly appreciate that. You had a press availability today with the Iowa Hawkeye men's basketball team. Obviously, we record this every Tuesday afternoon, listeners, so I want you to know that. So this airs on Friday night. So, David, first and foremost, Happy New Year to you, and how's everything going with you? What information do you have for us today from the press availability?
Yeah, always good to catch up with you, Dave. Yeah, things are going well. A couple of key things, I think, coming out of the press availability with Frank McCaffrey and a couple of the players is, number one, it sounds like Connor McCaffrey is going to play on Thursday against Maryland, which would mean that he's going to obviously be available Sunday when Minnesota comes to town. You know, the players are just chomping at the bit to play the Golden Gophers again. And it sounds like Joe Toussaint is going to be able to play Thursday as well. Remember, he had a very brutal, unintentional, of course, eye poke in the last game, which forced him to sit out, which allowed freshman Aaron Eulis to come in, and he made some very positive things happen. So on the injury front, that's good news for the Hawkeyes. And as far as everything else, remember, Luka Garza is from that DC area, and he's a little bit sad, a little bit upset that there won't be able to be any fans, friends, or family to be able to go to his last game in the area. But he's very, very highly motivated because, remember, Dave, Maryland did not kick the tires with Luka Garza that much. And, you know, he'll find anything for motivation. So I'd be surprised if he wasn't playing with more of a chip on his shoulder against the Terrapins.
Yeah, I agree with that big time. And as you mentioned, they only play Maryland once this year. So as this show airs on Friday night, that game will be played already on Thursday. So let's go more into that Minnesota game. Obviously, we've got to watch Maryland with Ayala and also with Wiggins. But Sunday, that's where the fans, you said the players are chomping at the bit. I think the fans are ready for this rematch against Minnesota at Carver Hawkeye this time, Sunday on Big Ten Network, 1:30 Central Time tip. And I got to tell you, David, from a fan perspective, not just covering the team, and I know you got to be excited too, and we got to talk Keegan Murray just for a second. When you talk about freshmen and Aaron Eulis, Keegan Murray, what more can I say?
Yeah, you know, I think that's a good point, Dave. I really don't know what more you can say about Keegan. And I'll say this, remember, not a lot of people were very excited about when Fran did offer them and they committed between him, Keegan, and Chris. But I got to give a shout out to Sean Bach, 24/7 Sports, Hawkeye Insider. He was leading the charge of people. He's a really good player. DME Academy down in Daytona Beach was good for him, Dave. And the way he's been able to come out strong, both ends of the floor, be versatile, make things happen, fearless too, might I add. For him to be able to step up to the free throw line and make go-ahead free throws with 16 seconds left as a freshman, and really is, you know, one of his first Big Ten games, I think that tells you that he has the it factor and he's going to be a major contributor, not just this season, but for many seasons down the road.
Oh, and well stated. And Keegan and Chris Murray are legacy guys. Their dad played for the Iowa Hawkeyes back in the Jess Suttles days when we had Jess on last week. And so Kenyon Murray. So he comes by it naturally. But you're right. When they came out of Cedar Rapids Prairie, Chris and Kenyon, you're right. A lot of the fans weren't ecstatic about Fran's choice with that. But yeah, you mentioned it, the DME Academy, and they went away for a year and honed their game. my goodness, the double-digit scoring that he has, the rebounding he does off the bench, going after loose balls the way he does, and diving on the floor and getting to those team rebounds, they call them. I couldn't be more impressed with the leadership he's showing as a freshman. So you're right. I think their dad has talked to him a little bit about being ready to play in the Big Ten, not just for the Iowa Hawkeyes, David, because as we know, this is going to be one tough season. And Michigan State finally gets off the schneid and they win a game. So they're 1-3 in the Big Ten. But I'm going to let you take about the next 15, 20 seconds and talk about the rest of the lay of the land for the Big Ten season that you see.
Absolute chaos, Dave. I think that's the number one thing. Michigan looks to be like they're going to be a legit squad as well, probably top 4, top 5. But the Big Ten winner, whoever wins it, Dave, is probably going to have 6 or 7 losses. The only team you can maybe take for granted, it's Nebraska, but 11 or 12 Big Ten teams are looking like they're going to be NCAA tournament caliber teams.
Well stated as always. The Hawkeyes ranked number 5 right now in this early week AP poll. So congrats to them and keep moving onward and upward, 9-2 right now. David, thanks so much. We'll catch up with you next week, my friend.
Hey, thanks, Dave. Appreciate it as always.
Back with more Hawkeyed with me, Dave O'Hara, with James Vandenberg, former Hawkeye quarterback, and then Jeff Horner, former Iowa Hawkeye men's basketball playing great. Back with more in a few moments.
One word means more to farmers than any other: yield. Nobody knows this better than your friend in the field, Mershman Seeds. With industry-leading seed treatments like Trepidity ST, you'll see faster emergence and more bushels per acre. Become a part of the Mershman family and see the difference in your field. Ask your dealer for superiority. Mershman Seeds.
Welcome back to Hawkeyed with me, Dave O'Hara, and as you can see, I've located my buddy James Vandenberg on the screen next to me. James, the former Iowa Hawkeye quarterback, and now with CorridorInvestmentGroup.com, part of the RBC Wealth Management crew, and former Hawkeye receiver Bill Happel there as well. So we got the quarterback and the wide receiver handling your money and all your finances. So James, first and foremost, as always, thanks for joining us this early in the new year, show 2 for us here in the new year. How you doing, my friend? Everything good in your world?
Everything's good in my world. It's sunny. The snow is looking pretty today. All is well.
Hey, we've got and I'm glad to hear that, and same here. And we've got a little business to take care of from last week, you and I do, in reference to our conversation about the Iowa Hawkeyes season as a whole, as a total. Of course, we're all still licking our wounds from the Music City Bowl being canceled and Missouri having to bow out. So let's talk about the season as a total. You and I discussed this briefly last week, and I want to go into more detail with you. 6-2 Hawkeyes after losing those first two games, tough games, one on the road at Purdue, 24-20, and then at Kinnick Stadium against Northwestern, the eventual Big Ten West champions. And so the Hawkeyes start off 0-2 after losing that game 21-20. And seemingly, James, Hawkeyes had both of those games at hand and let them slip away, but they went on a roll after that and won the next 6 and finished the season 6-2, capitalized and punctuated by a big victory at Kinnick Stadium to close their season out. We didn't know it at the time, but they throttled Wisconsin in a pretty handily fashion there, 28-7. So, curious on your thoughts. Go back to where we were this last summer of 2020 with the whole Chris Doyle situation and all the charges being alleged and put towards the program, and Kirk Ferentz of racism by former players and trying to right the course. So I'm going to kind of back off here just a little bit and take your thoughts and hear what your comments are, being a former player, knowing that era of when the players really started talking to former players, and some went farther back. But I'm curious on your thoughts in as much detail as you want to go into of how this all played out, James.
Yeah, I mean, when you kind of reflect on that, the first thing I think is just how proud I am of both the team, the staff. I mean, I fully expected this, quite frankly, but if it's not a testament to Coach Ferentz, I don't know what is. You think of what that team and what that staff and players has gone through. I mean, in the spring, you get COVID-19. School gets wonky. There's no spring ball. There's no training. Then comes social justice reform, quite frankly, which leads to, a lot of allegations coming out, losing of a strength coach who was obviously a very central figure in the program. And then you come into a season where the season's off, the season's back on, the season's shortened. You don't know every week. There's testing. There's no doubt the easy answer to any of this would just be fold or to split apart, or you'd see the transfer portal fill up or whatever the case. And you didn't see any of that. I'm just so impressed, and was so impressed over the summer when it really felt like we were kind of in the light for the wrong reason, quite frankly, of just how unified the group was. And even talking to the guys that I know on the team, you heard just, yeah, I think on the outside there was a lot of heat, but on inside they were handling it like men. They were communicating, they were talking about their differences. And very shortly after, I heard nothing about but how strong they were. They're the strongest they've ever been. So hearing that kind of stuff and just seeing how it was handled, I knew this was a good group of guys. And when you go through the fire like that, I mean, yeah, losing a game by a point stinks, but it's irrelevant compared to what they had already been through. So, of course, you lose by a point, you lose by 4 points. We could have very easily been 8-0. It would have been an awesome year to have a 12-game season, but we got to commend this staff, these guys, these players for, I mean, sorting their way through a very tough year. And I think you've seen that in college football. I think a lot of teams have just taken the excuse of, oh, it's a messed up year, that's why we're 4-6, or, oh, it's a messed up year, that's why we're throwing more interceptions or turning the ball over. It's a messed up year. Our guys, you haven't heard that one bit, and I don't think you will. And we clearly handled it as well as it could be handled. This hasn't been easy. I mean, these are college kids. Let's remember that. They're 18 to 22. These are not professionally paid athletes. These are not people that even, I mean, what is it? Your frontal cortex isn't even fully developed till you're 25. Like, these are kids, and they were handling this, and it goes to Coach Ferentz. I mean, he was the one kind of guiding the ship through rough waters, and here we are. And I think we should all look and be very proud of how they've handled it and what they were able to accomplish.
And I think you hit upon so many great points there. And the one I want to highlight, it shows great leadership by the coaching staff and then the players as team leaders, a great level of maturity by these players. And I'm going to ask you directly, and I've avoided this for a while with you, and you can go as into it as shallowly or as deeply as you'd like, but I got to ask this question. What did you see during your playing days from 08 to the 013 when you finished your 5 years of eligibility? What are your thoughts about that program? And you can get, again, detailed if you want or not. I'm just curious if you felt there was need for improvement the way it was pointed out, or what were some of your experiences and thoughts, and what was your experience?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And certainly there's been so many conversations around this. When this broke, there were so many different guys and different opinions. And I was in a text message thread with 230 something former Hawkeyes, and there was opinions all over the board. I think what I'd garner the most is, I mean, something had sounded like it had changed maybe a little bit even post my time. I mean, DJK is completely irrelevant, quite frankly. He's irrelevant. I can't believe the media ran with that story. Shame on them. I was there for that. Anybody knows that's irrelevant. And he was one of the sparks that tried to ignite this whole thing. And that should have never even been a spark, because that is not fair to Coach Doyle or Coach Ferentz, quite frankly. It's not fair. And I thought that was put to rest. But I mean, clearly something had changed in these last couple of years. And clearly there was guys that did feel slighted. I mean, I'm not going to call any of these guys liars. I mean, is there things that could have been improved on? Absolutely. I think every person in a position could say that. But I mean, a lot of these guys who are speaking, I mean, when you think about a Mike Daniels, that is a world-class individual. When you think about a Chris Kirksey, that is a world-class. Those are world-class people, let alone football players. So I'm going to listen to them when they talk. I had lockers by those guys. They're great people. They're not looking for attention. I think there was probably some people, I mean, looking for attention too. And that's got to be sorted through. But at the end of the day, we tried to take the best step. It's united the team. We need to be better going forward. And I think everybody knows that.
I think your comments encapsulated everything that we all experienced. I was one of those media members. Well, I'm not really a media member, but the guys that I had on my show who cover the Hawks regularly, they've tried to give him a little bit of a voice, but the ones I had on my radio shows and later on now this television show had squashed those DJK comments right away. And nothing against, Akram Wadley as well, but same thing. Those two guys, pretty much you wanted to take a look at it at the base of it, as you mentioned, and see what else was going on. But once it came out that those two specifically or particularly seemed to be trying to garner attention, it was put to rest pretty quick. But you're right. The rest of the media that tried to run with that, I made sure I cleansed my radio shows of any of that before I even had those guys on and said, look, we're not going this direction. So if you have this, this, and this, and they vetted the stories and said, no, Dave, you're dead on the money. We're not going to go down that path either. So I'm happy to say that because, again, as you mentioned, you don't want to take something as serious as those allegations lightly. But once on the surface, you didn't have to scratch far under the surface to see where those things were going. So I think you hit on that perfectly. I think those that wanted to run with those guys and try to make it slanderous, then they did that. And that's unfortunate, as you said, and that's not fair to be more accurate. So, James, I can't tell you how much I greatly appreciate your candor, and we're going to dig more deeply into this as the season goes on with you here on this show. But I want to also talk about some guys that are departing for the NFL next week with you as well. That process, you being in the financial planning industry, there's so much to consider with these guys in that whole process. You had your free agent process with the Vikings after your playing days in 2013, and so we want to get a little more into that, the post-playing career of these guys. So, James, former Iowa Hawkeye quarterback, team leader, your comments are very, very suited to what's going on in and around the program, as always. But former Hawkeye quarterback James Vandenberg, again, part of the CorridorInvestmentGroup.com or RBC Wealth Management. James, thank you so much, and we'll pick this back up with you next week, my friend.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. For James Vandenberg, this is Dave O'Hara. We'll close out the show, Hawkeyed with me, in about a couple minutes here. And then we'll have Jeff Horner joining us, former Hawkeye basketball star and current Truman State head basketball coach. And as you can see on the screen, we've got Jeff Horner joining us. Jeff, former Iowa Hawkeye great. I will say this very simply. You can put Jeff's career pretty easily in a nutshell. All the lists that Luka Garza is going up the list of scoring, Jeff is on any meaningful offensive category in Iowa basketball history. Former Mr. Iowa basketball in high school out of Mason City, committed to play for the Hawkeyes his freshman year in high school. MVP, or back then it was called MOP, of the 05-06 Big Ten tournament. The championship team, he and Greg Bruner and Adam Hluskin and the rest of the crew won. First and foremost, as always, Jeff, thanks for joining us. And secondly, now that you're in your third year as head man at Truman State men's basketball, how's everything going with you?
Thanks for having me. Everything's going good, so can't complain. We talked about it, but been in quarantine for about I believe it's been 10 days now. So this is my last day in quarantine, I guess you could say, and I'm out tomorrow, and I'm ready to get out of my house.
And as you mentioned with your wife and kids too, everybody's quarantined, but you look great coming back afterwards. You're going to be able to coach your team tomorrow night. You got a home game, and looking forward to talking about your team's progress this year. You're still doing well with the assistant coaches taking over, and you've had some players go in and out of the lineup. You're 6-1 overall, and you're only playing conference games, so you're at or near the top of the GLVC conference, Great Lakes Valley Conference, at 6-1. So let me ask you specifically, if you don't mind getting into as much detail, and you joined me on radio yesterday and went into pretty good detail about what you had to go through as a coach, testing positive for COVID-19 and now moving on with your team. Take us through that process, if you would, for the last 10 days, please.
Yeah, the NCAA makes us test once a week. Our league kind of said, all right, we're going to test once a week. And so it was kind of we came back from Christmas break and we tested on that Monday. I want to say it was, I believe, the 28th. I don't know. I don't even know when it was that we tested. It feels like a long time ago. But we tested, and unfortunately, I came back positive. And then obviously went straight home from there, and tried to take a PCR test because I hadn't had any symptoms or anything like that, and that came back positive. Unfortunately, we didn't get it for about 3 or 4 more days, and then actually on Tuesday with our machine again, I tested negative. So, but I probably did have it. So it's one of those things where you got to isolate, stay away from people, and make sure that you don't give it to anyone on our team for sure. But we came back and we played last Thursday. We didn't have our starting shooting guard, Mason Miller. He was out due to COVID. He got it a couple days after we went home for break. But you know what? In the end, I would much rather have our kids go home for break and be able to see their families. And it's an interesting time for sure, but I think being able to see your families is a small price to pay, to play some basketball games, that type of thing. And you just never know, like my parents are getting older, so I'm not going to stay down here in Kirksville, Missouri. when they're getting older, and we don't know how many more Christmases we're going to be able to have together. So it's one of those things where, I'd rather see my family, and, I know those guys want to see their family, and unfortunately you have positive test, and we knew this was going to happen. Our guys came out, last Thursday against Maryville. We didn't play that great without Mason. But in the end, it's going to be the team that adjusts and can adapt the quickest and be able to play. And the next man up is got to be a big time philosophy for us, for sure.
And you talked about this even earlier this fall when you were on radio with me, and then once this TV show started with me in November here, we're into week 10 now, and you mentioned it all those weeks ago, almost 3 months ago. And yes, by the way, it was last Monday, the 28th. I know the days run together for you, but you were doing radio with me, and then you said, I can't do TV because you're going to be, quarantined. But no, you look great now, and you're going to be back coaching tomorrow. And I want to mention, oh yeah, you're welcome. Got the beard going. I like that. That's a good quarantine look. So now, are you going to keep it for luck for the game tomorrow night, or are you going to get rid of it, do you think?
No, I'm going to try to get my hair cut tomorrow, and definitely shave off the beard.
Okay, clean it up for the game and keep.
Don't want to look like a caveman anymore. So I think that's bad luck. So I needed a haircut before I went into quarantine. I definitely need one now.
See, so I knew it had luck to involve with it. That's right. And of course, listeners, as you know, we record this, and viewers, we record this show every Tuesday afternoon. And Jeff's game we're talking about is tomorrow night, Wednesday. And then, of course, he plays this weekend as well. Again, they play, and not until next week or on Sunday. But I'll tell you what, the schedule never rests. And you talked about this, though, a couple months ago, Jeff, about how important it was to stay healthy, to stay ready. And you knew this, it wasn't if it was going to happen, but when and to whom it was going to happen. And Tom Izzo, Michigan State's coach, had it earlier in the year. And as you mentioned, there's so many things going on. And those guys going home, that Mason Miller you mentioned specifically, all 5 of your starters still Iowa kids. So that's always nice to have that in our back pocket to talk about your Truman State Bulldogs, as you mentioned, going back to see your parents in Mason City. But let's move towards the Iowa Hawkeyes. And good luck again the rest of this week until we talk to you again next week, a couple games. And I want to hear all about it from you. But I want to talk about the Iowa Hawkeyes now moving back into the top 5 after a big victory against Rutgers. And you and I talked about it off air, how tough that was going to be. And now you got Maryland waiting again. We're recording this Tuesday afternoon. They play Maryland on Thursday, which will be January 7th. And then, of course, the rematch against Minnesota on Sunday, this time at Carver Hawkeye. Give me your takeaways from the Hawkeyes so far this season and what's upcoming as we mentioned those 2 games.
Yeah, I was able to watch the Rutgers game. I think Rutgers is a very good basketball team, and to be able to go in there and get a big road win, after obviously, people will say, well, maybe we should have beaten Minnesota, that type of thing. But going on the road in the Big Ten and getting a win is huge. It's not like Minnesota is not a very good team. They're a very good team, and they have a guard and that's extremely good in the Carr kid, and so he can get his own shot whenever he wants. And unfortunately, he got hot in that game, and that's just kind of the way it goes. And then obviously Iowa rebounded, being able to get wins against Northwestern and Rutgers. So I think that was extremely huge to see them bounce back, because after you lose a game, it's hard to get back to where you were confidence wise. And the goal, I think, should always be, if you get beat, you never want to lose 2 in a row. And I think that they have that mentality, and just a bunch of tough kids, and to be able to get those wins is huge for them.
And you have talked about this with me all year as well, on radio, on this TV show, all the other interviews you've done with me in the past, how tough the Big Ten is, and the national pundits, and you're going through the same thing in the GLVC in your conference, how tough it is. Every night, there is no night off. As you mentioned, losing to Maryville, and then you come back, and you beat Southern Indiana, a tough team. And so you've got a lot to look at comparatively with the Big Ten at a different level. But man, I'm glad to see now the national people, national media, other people around basketball are noticing there are no nights off. The Hawks got a couple big wins, as you mentioned, after those tough losses against Gonzaga and then Minnesota. But they're back in the top 5. They slipped to number 10. Now they're back to number 5 in early this week's AP polls. So you take a look at that. It's good to see from a national perspective that the Hawks are getting that respect, and the Big Ten is. But you and I both know, and you specifically know, how rugged that Big Ten is going to be for the rest of the year, Jeff.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's obvious that, the writers and the coaches and everyone thinks that the Big Ten is a really good conference. I think they got 8 or 9 teams ranked in the top 25. So anytime, you have almost 3/4 of your conference ranked, I think that probably bodes pretty well for how good the league is. And so, for Iowa to be where they're at right now, teams are kind of going up and down. You look at Michigan State, who's 1-3, who was ranked pretty high at the beginning of the year, and anything can happen. So, like I said, you gotta make sure you protect home, and you got to go on the road, and you got to sneak out some victories here and there, and try to take advantage of that for sure.
You hit the nail on the head. Last week it was 9 out of the 14 were ranked in the top 25. Now this week it's 7. But in KenPom, there are 13 of the 14 teams ranked in the top 53 in KenPom rankings, which has become the new go-to for a lot of people. Actually has been for a handful of years here, but as well, the Big Ten, this may be a handful or a 2 handful, maybe 6 or 7 losses win the Big Ten regular season this year, and that only means the Big Ten tournament's going to be something else. And I got to ask you one quick takeaway before I let you go. The National Basketball Tournament, March Madness, is going to be in the state of Indiana at a hallowed place like Hinkle Arena and Assembly Hall and Mackey Arena, all throughout Purdue, Indiana, Butler's home place where they shot the movie Hoosiers. What are your thoughts about that? It's kind of a bubble, for lack of a better term, that the NCAA tournament, March Madness, going to stick with the same start dates, try to go with the same schedule, same team, same amount of teams in, same time frame. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, it's definitely going to be interesting trying to do everything there. In the end, you can put teams in hotels and but in the same sense, they're also public places, those types of things. So to try to keep people out, I've been to the Final Four in Indianapolis twice. Had a very good time, might I tell you. But Indianapolis is an awesome place to be, and it's an awesome basketball city, and Indiana is obviously an awesome basketball state. But there's a lot of fun things to do there, so you're going to probably have people flooding the streets and a lot more people there. So I like the idea. It's going to be extremely interesting to see how it works out, and to tell you the truth, teams who are going to be the most disciplined and be able to stay in their bubble and probably not leave the hotels and that type of thing are probably going to be the teams that are most successful. And, you guys kind of saw it with the NBA bubble this past year. Some guys even snuck out of that, and had to come back to quarantine. So, like I said, you better be extremely dedicated, but I also think it bodes well for Iowa that it's in Indianapolis, because I know when we want it, there's a ton of fans that, will make their way over there. And with Iowa being a national championship contender, that's only going to help them. Now, you don't know what they're going to do with fans or anything like that at games, but in the same sense, I think they know the whole state of Iowa is behind them for sure.
Well stated as always, Jeff. Can't wait to catch up with you next week. Thank you so much for joining us. Coming out of quarantine, good luck in your next couple games till I talk to you again. Thank you so much. All-time Iowa Hawkeye men's basketball playing great Jeff Horner, now head man at Truman State University men's basketball, into year 3, 6-1, clipping along, having a great year and coming out of quarantine. Jeff, thank you so much. Look forward to catching up with you next week, my friend.
Thanks, Dave.
For Jeff Horner, James Vandenberg, David I. Colton, Joe Mershman, and you, the viewers, thanks for tuning in. Please stay tuned for just a minute afterwards and watch the credits roll and support my advertisers and sponsors who support this show. Without them, we are not on the air. So please support them as they support me. And thanks to you, the viewers. We are #1 in late night. Rankings and ratings came out, and KFXA, Fox 28, very happy with your viewership, as am I. So thank you so much. For all the aforementioned guests, I'm Dave O'Hara. Hawkeyed with me. That's all from me. Thanks to all of you.